I never viewed LinkedIn as important in my entire career until about a year ago. And then I was like, oh, there's this, social media thing over here that is actually helpful. And I didn't see it as helpful until I owned my own business. And then I was like, oh, I get, why this is helpful now. So those are great tips, and I will definitely be using those because it is a platform that for me has huge implications on who I can connect with. And as I move towards reaching a national scale at some point, it is about who you know.
Today we have Emily Verdonk, an entrepreneurial accountant out of Tacoma. She has her own firm, Morris Verdonk Accounting, and they specialize in nonprofit and rural utilities. She also recently got the chance to speak at the Accounting and Finance Show, if you've heard of it. And she also speaks a lot on building a firm as well as building a family at the same time. Very, extremely difficult to do. So glad to have her on the show, and let's learn a little bit more about Emily and, why she got started. So Emily, go ahead, tell them a brief, 2-minute who you are, and we'll get into much more of, how you've built, how you're building your firm.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I'm Emily, everyone, and you can actually see this is my little guy, Ridge. This is a couple years ago. He's 4 now, so that's an outdated picture. But I am a mom, and I worked in public accounting for a really long time. And when I had him, I knew that public accounting wasn't going to fit my life how I wanted it to look going forward. So I was able to recreate what I wanted my life to look like. It's really interesting that happened out of 2 super hard conversations. And the first is when my ex-husband left. And then the second was when I got laid off from a job. And both of those sound like horrible things, but they pushed me and allowed me to open my own business because everyone kept saying, you should open your own. Why don't you own your own already? And I was like, I don't, but I should. So I was able to really drill down and be like, you know what? I have this huge passion in my life to spend time with my family and be home as much as I can while they're here, because really they're only here for a short amount of time. But I still needed to work. I still wanted to work and wanted to do things that made me excited and happy. So all of a sudden, here I was a business owner, and I'm still pretty shocked that this is where my business is and this is what I'm doing. And I look back at things and I'm like, oh my goodness, I could have never imagined such a wonderful life.
Really? So then you're telling me that you wake up today and you don't regret, starting your firm. That's awesome. So real quick then, because what I find fascinating is that and what I find fascinating with a lot of accountants that, have got experience, spent time learning their craft, right? A lot of people do tell them that they should break off, start their own because, well, in something like accounting, you really can, especially in 2018. And we'll talk a little bit more about the opportunities that you've taken. But I find it interesting that before you weren't thinking about, starting your own practice, then, you started thinking about a little more and you were finally, prompted to start it. That is something that I don't necessarily know because I did go into the Big 4 track, but I always knew that at some point, I just didn't know it was going to be early on. At some point, I'm going to break off and start a business. So I thought of myself as, okay, well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur yet. When it all happened within literally the matter of 3 weeks to a month where it was like, okay, I am quitting my job and starting this thing. So tell me a little bit more about those first few weeks or maybe the weeks before where you're sort of thinking, how do I start? Because, that's just fascinating.
Yeah. So the place I had been working at, I'm watching the numbers and I was like, man, I don't think I should probably be here financially. I think it was a startup company. And I was like, they have a great staff and they don't really need me. And so at some point I did get laid off, which was a beautiful thing for both that company and for me.
Awesome.
And I was interviewing, and people just kept saying, you really should own your own firm. And so I went back to where I had my auditing career at Johnson Stone and Pagano, and I said, hey, I'm going to open up my own firm. And they were like, oh, we thought you already did.
Awesome.
And I was like, okay, so that's great. I could use some clients, guys. And they're like, well, we have some. How big of a mess do you want?
Right.
And I was like, well, one that pays a lot of money, right? Like, I need to make a living here. So I was able to actually secure a client within probably 4 weeks of saying, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I spent probably 2 or 3 weeks that I was like, okay, what am I doing? I'm still interviewing. I'm kind of thinking about starting my own. And then when I made that decision, I had one client right away, and then my second client followed very shortly afterwards.
That's awesome.
It was very crazy. In that first 9 months, I didn't do a lot of marketing. I did a little bit of keeping up with people in the industry that I knew, just being like, yeah, refer people to me. And then, so that was March 2017. January 2018, I really focused down deep in my business and decided to go forward. But those first couple of weeks, it's all about getting your business license and being like, oh, wow, I'm open. Like, now what do I do? Do I need to write a business plan? Because I didn't have any of that.
Right.
I do now.
There you go.
Yeah, what kind of equipment do I need? Well, I'm an accountant. It's very easy. I need QuickBooks and a laptop, right off the bat. Those are very easy to acquire and fairly inexpensive startup costs.
And so at what point did you say, you know what, this is amazing. I made the right choice. It's going to work.
Yeah, it was probably fairly early on. I really kind of went back and forth of, I really like just having a little tiny client base and living on a little bit of an income, a lot smaller than I was used to, and being home a lot. And I was okay with that for a period. And then I kind of thought, oh, this is actually scary because I don't have any kind of incoming client base. Like I don't have anybody in the wings. I'm not doing any marketing. If this client leaves, I'm out of luck and I'm going to have to go get a job. And that was not something I wanted to do. I did not want to have to go back out and do the interview process again. So that's when my mindset shifted from I've created a job for myself to I own a business and I'm going to be marketing. I'm going to be actively pursuing clients. I'm going to actively try to grow. I'm going to actively try to look to hire employees. What does that look like and how do I build that? And what does my accounting services, what specialization do I have in that and how does that work?
Yeah, so I find that very interesting. I mean, that's something that is probably well known about starting a firm as well, because this is a marketing show. So a lot of, practice owners, when they do start those first 2 clients, I mean, they're not from marketing and they're not from marketing and branding, the way that I talk about it a lot and I champion it a lot. But I do understand the steps that, and if one of my clients is looking for a client this week or next week, I mean, we have the processes in place to go ahead and attack that. But I do find, that first, I guess, 9 months of starting a firm interesting because, well, that's all you really need is the first few clients to have a job under your belt, right? A few jobs under your belt to, have some revenue coming in to at least pay the overhead, right?
Yeah.
And working from home using the softwares that we know today, I mean, you can make something like an accounting firm can become pretty profitable fast, right? If you're not spending money everywhere.
Yes, incredibly profitable fast.
Right, and especially, by yourself. So before we get into more of the marketing, I want to just ask, have you always had those rural utilities and nonprofit clients, or did you kind of mix it up at first? And, when did you start saying, this is our specialization from the beginning, or did you kind of figure out that would be your niche?
Yeah, that one took a little while. So at first I opened and I was like, I'm open. I'll take anybody. I felt a little desperate. I need some money here. So I did. I ended up working with some clients that were not a very good fit. And realized that pretty early on that they weren't going to be a good fit. They were out of my comfort zone. It wasn't that I couldn't do the work, but I had a lot of learning curve in that specific industry.
I see.
And so I was able to identify that and move them to somewhere else. And then, so it took me probably the first 9 months. And then in January of 2018, I really started to drill down and look at what am I incredibly good at. So I spent almost all of my time auditing in rural utilities and the telecommunications and water departments areas and nonprofits. So like during the busy season, I would just travel to all these telephone companies and in my state, I know who everybody is and where everybody's located. And if I'm traveling to go hike or on vacation, I'll stop in and say hi.
Right. That's awesome.
And they have that environment where that's okay to do.
Of course.
And then nonprofits, I audited so many nonprofits within Tacoma where I live. So I had a really good network. And the more I've been networking now, the bigger my base is becoming and the more well-known I'm becoming. But it took me a while to really drill down and be like, okay, so I know these two specific industries. How can I serve them the best? What type of needs do they have? What type of things did I see when I was auditing that I can come in and fulfill that as an auditor I couldn't do? So I really had to, it's interesting coming from, and I think you've probably experienced some of this too, when you come from a CPA firm and you do a very specific item, and then you come and you create something else and you pull skills from that base you just had, but you're creating something a little different. So there was definitely a learning curve there of trying to figure out, okay, I know industry-wise, now what do I do in these industries? And I spent a lot of time, a lot of my weekends were just spent, writing out, okay, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I like to do this, I like to do that. These companies need industry-specific accounting. They need financial statements. These boards don't understand their financial statements. How can I help them do that? Right. So I spent a lot of time early this year, January and February especially, writing that out.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that definitely adds to the trajectory of your firm, your practice being successful. Because at this point, you're playing on the things that you would win at anyway, right?
Yes.
So you can go to sleep at night knowing, hey, I'm good at this stuff. If I do lose clients, I can pick up clients maybe, in another region and give that awesome service based off solid experience. So, and here's my next question to you based off of that, because I see a lot of younger CPAs, not spending all that time. Maybe they are more entrepreneurial, so they want to start, with only 3 to 5 years of experience. Or, I've seen CPAs 27 years old to 29 years old leaving and then completely starting their own firms. And maybe even though they're 29 years old, they get, a partner that does have more experience than them to come and join them. Right. So how do you think about that? What would you tell them with all the experience that you have? The jump that they're making, it's obviously I wouldn't want to tell anyone, don't start a business, right?
No, I would never say that either.
Don't try. Right. Don't try.
You should always try if it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah. But so for them to be successful, what is something you could tell them that where they don't necessarily have the same experience as you?
Yeah, so I've been in accounting for about 15 years. And for me personally, I would have never been able to do this earlier on in my career. Number one, I personally lack the confidence. And that's going to vary with each individual. Some people are going to naturally have more confidence than others. One of the great things about working in a firm is you learn different things from different people. And so you're pulling this huge knowledge base. So I don't like to do federal taxes. That was very well known where I worked. But that was something that needed to be done at the CPA firm. And so someone else would work on the same clients that I did on the tax side. So we would collaborate together. and they would share their knowledge with me and I would share my knowledge with them, but I didn't have to know everything. So that's one of the benefits of working with other people, especially early on in your career. I think if you do go out on your own, one of the biggest hurdles is making sure you stay connected within your industry. A lot of times you see other accounting firms or CPAs as your competition, but they're actually your best people to talk to. And I'm like, they're my best friends.
Right.
Because you're going to get sharpened by talking to them and what they have to say and how you view things. I just actually had a conversation this morning with another CPA, and she only does taxes, and she's also a sole proprietor. And we were talking about the cannabis industry because that's huge in Washington right now, and what that looks like for your finances and your tax return. And to have someone to discuss that with, it's really important to build that network, especially as industry changes and you go to classes, to build those people that you can talk to and say, hey, what do you think about this? What are you doing? How are you solving this problem? Iron sharpens iron. So I think it's really important to stay connected within your industry.
Yeah. And speaking of, staying connected in the industry, I know that you recently spoke at the Accounting and Finance show, and you spoke on growing a firm and family at the same time, yes. which to me, I mean, I have my immediate family, but, I'm starting my business. I don't have a child right now, a toddler like you do up there. But speak to more of this GROW concept, G.R.O.W, that you spoke about at the conference.
Yeah, so I basically have 2 toddlers right now. I have my son who's 4 and my business who's almost 2. So they're both very high maintenance, very hands-on. So I'm growing both of them. So growing a firm and a family, replacing fear and finding courage, operating a hybrid lifestyle, and the wow factor. So growing a firm and a family, there's a lot of challenges in both, and looking at how do you do that? What does that look like? What steps am I going to put in place to say, okay, I need to grow my firm in this direction and I need to grow my family in this direction. So for my family, I want to use, okay, I'm not an arts and crafty mom, but I think it's important for him to have those hands-on experience. So I get a Kiwi box every month for him, and it comes in the mail, and it has 3 little projects, and it's STEM centered. So, he's getting all the science and math and art that I would never come up with.
Right.
I try to use things that will help push me as a parent and bridge as a child forward in learning. And the same way that I have a network for my business, and I have a business coach and a network around that who helps push me forward in my business. And without those things happening, I would stagnate and be like, okay, yeah, here I am. I'm good.
Right.
But always looking for those ways to, keep growing and produce a better product, connect more with my son, finding different ways to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you want to stop me? Or I can keep going.
No. So I just wanted to stop you real quick and ask if that was the first letter.
Yep. That was GROW.
Okay.
Or G. G. Yes. Growing a firm and a family.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So then R is replacing fear and finding courage. It's incredibly scary to step out and do this on your own. I'm sure you've probably faced some of this too. So you're your only income coming in. You still have bills to pay. I have a little person I provide for, he needs food, clothing, and shelter, and toys, because they're important in our life. So, there's a lot of pressure, of financial pressure, to go out on your own. I also believe in doing things debt-free. So I'm cash flowing all of it as I'm doing it. And that was really scary at the beginning. At this point, I've kind of come to the place where I'm like, okay, I've got some cash flow coming in. I work on saving and paying things. And what's the worst that could happen? If I lose everything and all of a sudden my bank account is 0, well, my worst case scenario, I've lived through my worst case scenario before, and you come out on the other side just fine. So taking that fear and the anxiety, and I had a lot of fear too around leaving my child. I know other women experience this too.
Okay.
But leaving your child either at a daycare facility or with someone else. I have a day family I leave him with.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has a young lady who's in her mid-20s who watches him.
Mm-hmm.
And then she lives with her parents. So this week, Grandpa's on vacation. So it's Grandma and Grandpa, and then the young lady who watches him. And then her sister's home from college, and her brother's a teacher, so he comes over during the day sometimes. And then the older sister has 2 children around Ridge's age, so they come over and play. So he's a family when I'm gone, and that took like out all this anxiety. And I was like, yes, when I go to work, I go to work. I concentrate and I get stuff done. So that took out a lot of the fear and gave me some courage. And then courage within my industry, I was really scared about how people would react to me.
Okay.
Which it's kind of ridiculous sometimes, but I had a lot of anxiety around that. And I went to my first telecommunications conference in May, and I saw one of my old bosses there. He was the first person I saw, and he's like, Emily, what are you doing here? And so I told him about like what I was doing, and he's like, oh, I knew, you owned your own, and a little bit about that. He's like, that's great.
Awesome.
And the second person I saw had been a former audit client, and he was like, Emily, what are you doing here? And so I got to spend the whole weekend like talking with him and telling him about what I do and what that looks like. And people were incredibly welcoming. And then the boss who I saw, I was sitting at dinner next to his wife, and she leaned over one night and she was, so it takes a lot of courage to come to this. And I was like, yeah, you're really right. Like I had some anxiety coming into this, but I've been so amazed at how people have just opened up their arms and been accepting, and been able to get plugged into industry associations. And I call people every week. How are you doing? So it's been better than I could have expected.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then is operating a hybrid lifestyle. I found there was 2 groups of mothers, especially. There was the group on this side that was like, I go to work 8 to 5. My child is in daycare all day long. This is how our life is, and it's fine. And then there was this other group over here who was like, I work from home, and my kids are around, and like, really like just kind of going with the flow. And I was like, oh, that like I like that idea, but that won't work because I work with finances. I'm on the phone. People don't respect having like the kids calling on you most of the time. Yeah. And I can't concentrate. So I've ended up in this weird middle spot where I have office hours. I work Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Those are my office hours. And then I work in the evening after he's in bed. So I'll work in the evenings from 7 to 10. So I work when he's at home, but he's asleep. And I go to the office and have office hours where I get to do my work really well. And then I don't work on Fridays.
Awesome.
But I was going to keep going. Sorry. The best part of being your own boss and owning your own firm is that when things kind of go awry, I showed up one day and my child care provider had gone to the ER. And I was able to bring him with me to work. And I was able to do that because I own my own business and I get to make my own decisions. And I had to go see a client that day. And it's fun to see over the last 15 years how the industry has changed, how people's perception of bringing your child into an office has changed. I don't apologize for it. This is kind of how life is. Life happens, and I need to bring him with me. And so he came, and I have this big, huge conference room in the office I was working on, and he just played cards the whole time. And that worked. And then I had another time where one of my nonprofits, they received some local and state money. And they're individuals in town at the governmental level called on Monday and said, we're coming on Friday to audit your program. And the VP goes, well, that's great. Our accountant's not here. So can you schedule another time? And they're like, nope, we're coming on Friday. So he talks to me, comes in. He's like, so Emily, we really, I know you don't work on Friday. Could you come in? And I was like, well, sure. But it's in between, a run and a play date. I'm going to be in my workout clothes and I'm going to have my son with me. And he's like, okay, that's great. And, it was really interesting. We sat around this big table and they had their 2 people and we had like 3 or 4 people, and The VP was sitting there playing cards with him. I was like, oh, that's hilarious.
Awesome.
And it's the tide has changed where it's just becoming more accepting. He's also an incredibly well-behaved little boy. So it works. But there's a lot more creativity in how you can schedule your life and how you can have your child be around you. I do a lot of networking items, coffee, video chats with him when I have him, because otherwise I run out of time.
Yeah. Like the first time we met, we got on Zoom here. I saw him in the background waving.
Yep, and I think he might have crawled over me a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, so adorable. And I know that, so on Instagram, you incorporate him into the marketing a little bit, right? The post a little bit. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Instagram is such an interesting platform. I really started out Instagram as like, oh, this is just our outdoor adventures. And then I was like, this is a really powerful platform. And A, everybody needs an accountant. And two, almost everybody you've ever talked to is involved in a nonprofit. So whether I'm speaking to more of an outdoor audience or whether I'm speaking to more of a business audience, everybody across the board, I feel like, has some interaction with a nonprofit. So it's become a really great medium to reach multiple different types of individuals who are on Instagram. And he, honestly, the pictures that I put up with him probably get the most likes out of anything I post.
Right, of course.
Because everybody wants to see, everybody really wants to see how you run your family and what that looks like. Not necessarily, oh, guess what? Functional expenses. I know how to help you do that. They don't really care about that. They want to see more of who you are and if it's a good personality fit. So that's Instagram has become more of like my personality and things that I might be thinking about in my own life and my own business.
So do people around Tacoma recognize recognize that?
Yeah, and you know what? It's really interesting. We do get recognized sometimes when we're out and about. I've actually been up in the mountains because I take him hiking with me, and he's been more places than most people in my state can only imagine.
Oh my God.
And we've been at trailheads, we've been on trails, and I've had people stop us and be like, "Oh, we know you from," and whether that's Instagram or the grocery store or somebody recognized me from another trail like earlier in the summer. They didn't recognize me; they recognized him.
Right.
But yeah, it's become a great way to meet people that I would have never been able to meet because my physical presence is so limited.
Of course, yeah. And you said something earlier that really, it hit home with me because it's what I tell CPAs and accountants constantly, that it's applicable across any profession really or any industry, but for CPAs especially, because they're trying to, or I see a lot of accountants, and this was before I even started this business, this is kind of why, but I saw a lot of accountants put like the word tax up right on Instagram, big letters, tax, and then like, do you need our services, right? Yep. But what I think really is what is powerful, not only about Instagram, but about LinkedIn, different mediums and that type of thing, is like, if you're going to get an accountant for any job, and there's so many accountants to do so many different things for you, but they all have to do with money, and they all have to, if you're a client, they all have to do with your money. So it's highly unprobable that you are going to land a client off of a first message in selling accounting services, right? Yes. Because the thing that needs to be established when you're dealing with a client's money is trust. Yep. And so, whether it's a picture or a video of you, let's say you don't like video, right? Or you can't, you just get nervous in front of the camera. Maybe you talk regular on the phone, but you're nervous in front of the camera. Whether it's a picture or a video, and you tell a little bit more about your life, or, even why you started the firm. A lot of accountants don't even talk about that at all. Yep. It's just getting to know the accountant, right? Yeah. And so I think, I do see a lot of accountants like yourself doing that, showing a little bit more of their personal life, even outside of the office. There's a lot of hiking pictures that you have up there on the trails and things like that. So beautiful. And I think it's underutilized tool in this space, right? But before I, harp on that, there are reasons that, accountants don't want to put them or their family or their dog on their Instagram, right? Because they don't want actually people to recognize them out on the trail, right? So
and that's true.
So what would you tell these accountants that maybe it is okay to have them just themselves, right? But if they're saying, you know what, or you were saying it, you weren't sure how you would be accepted in the space, right? So what would you tell an accountant that says, I would never put my family on social media, right?
Yeah, that's something I wrestle with a lot. Like it's been a continuous struggle back and forth with how much do you share about your family. So I have some specific guidelines for me that I use. And one is I share a very limited portion of where we actually go and what we actually do. I really limit posting where we go into Tacoma, especially for safety issues. And then in the mountains, when we go up there, I don't post things right away either. I kind of wait until a little bit afterwards, and then I post pictures. So I don't do anything immediate for safety standpoints. And then I don't use Ridge's real name. So Ridge isn't his name. I would never want someone to walk up to him and be like, oh, Ridge, I know you. So if someone walked up to him and said, Ridge, he wouldn't know he'd be like, what are they talking about? He wouldn't respond. So that's for his own safety. I know a lot of people use their child's real name, and that's fine. That's their decision. But especially with money, I would never want him to be in a spot that would jeopardize him. So, and then I'm also pretty careful about the number of face pictures I put on there too. And I go back and archive some of my face pictures of him so they don't stay on there for a long period of time. So I look at those things. And then he does spend some time with his dad. And so I would never want his dad to be in a spot either where someone came up and knew Ridge's real name and Ridge didn't know who they were and be like, okay, this is creepy.
Right.
So, and I've been creeped out too. Like I've had that experience where he was with his dad and they met a family at the park, and then we were at another kid function and this lady came up and she was super attentive to him, and I was like, okay, that's a little like on the weird side. So I just don't tag where we're at. I don't use his real name. Don't use geolocations.
Yeah, and I think all that is very smart, not only, from a business account, but even from a personal account as well. I think a lot of people, they say they care about privacy, but they're allowing themselves to post, exactly where they're at on their, even on Instagram stories or things like that, or checking in on Facebook, when really, if you think about it, well, no, I wouldn't want someone to know I'm there and then meet me there. And then especially if it's throughout my day where maybe I'm buying something or going to buy something or going somewhere with my family. There's just a lot of different situations of bad things that can happen. And the statistics, people will say, well, don't worry about it because the statistics say that that's not going to happen. Yeah, they say the statistics say it's very unlikely for that to happen, but I don't want to put me and my
I don't want to be that one.
Right. And so, I think that's all those controls that you've put in place. That's 100%. Right.
And I'm an accountant, we're all about, we like our things, all our ducks lined up in a row and having some controls and double checks and
Right.
And my personal life is like that too.
Of course. And I think, that's the way to do it. Regardless if you have your family on social or not, even if it's just you need to have proper controls in place where people are not invading your privacy where you don't want them to, or you have if you're going to go on record and talk about things, right? Maybe mention things about your family, then you have to be, especially as an accountant, I figure most accountants would be very precise on the words that, come out of their mouth when they are on camera, because one of the things that's, holding back maybe office managing partners to say, okay, go ahead, start making videos about our firm, right? Is that, well, they don't want either something bad to slip out, something about a client to slip out, anything that could hurt their firm, right? And so the way to do that is put controls in place, right? Well, we're not, I don't know, have just a list of things that we are not going to talk about on video. And if we do talk about it, then we're reviewing that before we let it out, right? So I don't think it's very risky to say these types of things is an excuse in 2018 when everyone's competitors are putting out, all these videos, right? So it's just a matter of having those controls in place.
Determining what is appropriate for your company. Each company is different, and what you want to allow out there and what you want your employees to say. So coming up with the guidelines for your company.
Yeah, and I was actually talking to a business valuation specialist the other day, or he helped a lot of CPAs and accountants that did appraisals, business valuations, things like that. And he was sort of a business coach, right? Kind of a marketer, but he was talking about marketing. So I jumped in the comments. I kind of commented on what he put, and I said at the end I said something about Instagram. And so what caught my attention on his reply was, I'm not on Instagram because my business valuation clients are not there. And then I said, well, they are. I just looked at them under the hashtag, at the very least, business valuation and business appraisal. And so your clients are there. Not only are they there, their clients are there even more so, right?
Yes.
So how has getting business from Instagram been for you? Have you, whether it's getting in touch with someone in the industry or in the DMs or anything like that, has there been what positives has there been? Because I just think when someone says something like, my client, I'm not on there, it would be different if they said, I'm not on there because I don't have time, or that's not the focus right now. But he said that I'm not on there because my clients are not on there, right? So how's your business experience been?
Yeah, so the nonprofit side, my opinion is everyone could be a client because everyone gives somewhere. So I haven't had direct revenue yet from Instagram referral, but it has a lot of great leads, and I've been able to stay in contact and meet some great people who I think down the road will produce some income-driven clients. On the utility side, that's been really interesting because there's a huge base of people who use rural utilities, but to find the people who run them on a social media platform has been much more challenging. So I do a ton of digging. Anytime I go to a conference and I get an email list, I sit down with that and I go through LinkedIn, especially first, and I search everybody's email and name and look for everyone to connect with. And then I do look on social media for that, and I tag rural utilities on several of my posts, depending on what I'm posting about. So it will be interesting to see how that grows in the next couple months and see what type of interaction I start getting in that area.
Yeah, so just to speak a little bit to that, I mean, I think, first of all, LinkedIn and whatever you're doing on LinkedIn, I haven't checked it out.
Not much.
But I just posted literally yesterday, and I've been saying this for a while, but LinkedIn, it's completely for professionals, for financial professionals right now. It's the 2018-2019 opportunity, because you can post something so simple, whether it's 2 sentences or whether it's a long video, and it will get, depending on how many people you have in your network, I have above 4,000. Some people, right. So you can go up to 30,000, and that's really where I'm trying to get. And I don't just want people in my network, right? I want CPAs, accountants, financial professionals, other types of things, tech, blockchain, people that are part of my industry as well, and even other marketers. So that connection list, it's an asset that I don't think people realize can produce so much return for them, right? So
Yeah.
I haven't looked at how much people you're connected with on LinkedIn, but I just said 4,000, and some people say, "Whoa," because they have 400 connections, right? And
Yeah.
so, but when you post something with 4,000 connections, it gets over 1,000 views very easily. I mean, two likes in my network, and I'm over 1,000 views because my people saw it, and then the people that liked or commented on my stuff, their network saw it, right? So this network effect on LinkedIn right now, it can go out of control, and it's not the reason I say LinkedIn is opportunity, it's because it's not the way it's happening on Instagram and really it's the way it used to happen on Facebook. Facebook now, it's not,
No.
they take down the organic reach, right? Because they want you to pay and use their ad product. It's the same thing is going to happen for LinkedIn. And so that's why I say it. Organic stuff does really well. And by the way, if you want to know how to get people into your network on LinkedIn, you don't just spam them and add them. But what you do is that there's actually this automation tool a lot of people are using called LinkedIn Helper. Now, I don't like automation. I like a robot. But so anytime I use a tool like that, I really try to make it as human as possible. What I don't want to do is go into someone's inbox and start selling immediately. That's just not the way I roll. That's not part of my selling philosophy. Because I look at people, and a lot of other people look at these first messages of people where it's a long email paragraph, right? And they're trying to get you to look at all their business, and it might be something you're interested, but more likely than not, you're going to say, this person is sending this out to everyone, right? So I make the LinkedIn Helper allows you to take out their name, the position, their company. And so if I want to add, let's say 300 CPAs today, then I target CPAs in a specific area and I say, hi, their name, right? I see you're at, and then if I'm lucky, it'll be their firm that they own, that they actually own, right? And then I say, I would love to invite you to my network where I discuss with some of the most forward-thinking accountants that also focus on triple entry bookkeeping. Maybe they haven't heard of that, so that's a flashy word that I use. Triple entry bookkeeping, blockchain, and things like that. And I actually don't even say that I do marketing because my headline already says CPA marketer.
Nice.
So I think that is a very human way to add people to your network.
Yeah.
And I get so many of those are a success where they actually do accept my invitation, and then some say, oh, very interesting, and then they ask about, how can I be a part of this discussion and things like that.
That's cool.
So that's really where you want to come across on social, is you want to get everybody a part of what you're discussing, right? If you're not discussing anything, social is only going to help so much, right? Everyone talks about lead generation. I'm not so concerned about lead generation, but I'm more concerned about if the accountants that constantly look at my pictures or videos that I'm putting out, are they commenting on my thing? And am I also building relationships with them by DMing them and LinkedIn messaging them? And I know I went on a long social media rant right here, but I think it's something that you can take advantage of too. And I would like to hear your thoughts on some of what I just said.
Well, I laughed when you told me how many you had, because I'm almost to 500, and I think some of that is a little generational too. Where I was I'm at the end of Generation X, excuse me, and that for me has huge implications on who I can connect with, and as I move towards reaching a national scale at some point, it's about who you know.
Yeah. And I will also say that although LinkedIn is I think the biggest opportunity, meaning I think if accountants hit it hard, even if you're by yourself, you can make so much business or so much connections, whether you need clients or not, right? Because it's not always about getting clients. When I was first starting my 2 weeks, I was on calls trying to get accountants, to use my service, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them would say that, well, I don't need clients right now going into the summer, that type of thing. And I would say, okay, well, how valuable is it to be one of the most well-known in your space? And you really can't put a value on that, because weird things happen, as in you get invited to maybe speak at a conference or on someone else's podcast or show or an event that they're having. Or maybe someone says, hey, you know what? You talk to a lot of nonprofits. You talk to a lot of rural businesses. I also talk to a lot of them. Let's join forces and kind of refer work to each other, right? So, I mean, so many things happen on social. And I said all that to say, although all these amazing things can happen from LinkedIn, you can't have all your eggs in one basket.
No.
So I see a lot of people putting all their eggs right now in Instagram when they really should be putting them in LinkedIn, hitting Instagram pretty hard, but most of those eggs should be in LinkedIn, then Instagram, then Facebook and Twitter, right? And no, I think things like, people will also say that social media is more of a millennial thing, right? and I know that millennials and even what's the next Gen Z, things like that, they can be a lot more savvy, a lot more fast. But what people like you have, Emily, and even other accountants that have got experience, started their own firm, is you actually have so many life lessons to talk about, like family, on top of your profession, right? So if you study my content, I almost always talk about marketing, because that's what I have. I rarely talk about starting a business. I rarely talk about actually building the firm, because I'm not building an accounting firm. I'm just spending a lot of time around accountants that are, right? And that's why I will be looked at as different than other millennials that you might see, and they try to be a business coach, right? I'm not, right. I'm not being a business coach. I'm coming in and with my best skill and doing marketing for these accountants. So
and we all need that help.
yeah. And I think a lot of people and a lot of mothers even would look to you if you talked even more about that, right? Whether I'm not sure. Do you have a podcast?
I do not.
You do not. It would be one of the best podcasts in accounting, because almost I would assume that almost no one is talking about what you would be talking about. And so let's say you're very busy. I'm just going to give you a quick tip. The easiest way to make a podcast for you would be to get, maybe if your car is quiet enough, on a pair of headphones on your drives, or maybe as you walk on the trails, document some of your thoughts about, raising your concepts that you already have, right? Just make them more tangible, right? And that's the reason I say all these things, marketing, podcast, it seems like a lot, but it's very precise. Meaning that you have so much ability to not just talk about tax, but also talk about all these family dynamics, business dynamics, life experience. And I think that's awesome. That's very needed in the space.
Well, thanks. Maybe I'll work on that this weekend.
Of course. So do you have any last words for all the accountants out there that are now they see how awesome you are, they're looking up to you? What words of wisdom do you have?
Well, I guess words of wisdom, if you are meant to be out doing your own thing, I'm a firm believer that the doors will open for you to get there. And that when they do, to take the opportunities that you get and to step out in courage, and don't be fearful about it, and don't let fear hold you back. I've definitely let fear hold me back in the past. And at this point, I'm just saying yes to every opportunity that comes. And because of that, I feel like I'm personally growing, my firm is growing, my son is growing. And I just keep saying yes, because really the worst thing that could happen is you go down to zero money and you start over. And You're always fine. We've seen so many people in this world who had it all and lost it all, and you know what? You just come back and you build it again. So if you are considering stepping out and doing your own thing, I really challenge you to look at what your skill set you're good at, what you want to do, what makes you excited when you wake up in the morning. And then if you have a family, how do you make sure you're spending enough time with them so that way they're growing and you're growing with them?
Love it, Emily. Thank you for being on the show. And if they need to find you, if they need to reach out, look for those words of wisdom. Where can they best find you?
Yep, you can email me at emily@morrisverdonk.com, or you can go straight to my website, morrisverdonk.com, and I'll spell that because Verdonk is not, it might not be how it sounds. So MORRIS, V as in Victor, ERDONK.
Great, and I'll be sure to link it below.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you,
Thank
Emily.
you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Of course.